right, Steve White, how are you, my friend?
Karen, I'm doing just fine, thank you.
Awesome. Welcome to the Spots of Love podcast. I'm super excited to have you on this podcast. You know, this is for Barney history fans, which we're both a part of.
Yes.
And we've been talking to a lot of fans, but getting the opportunity now to talk to people outside of the fans is also really exciting because I've shared many times on this podcast before that I think this is one of the only communities that exist around a show where people who worked on that show interact with their fans almost like their extended family than you would in almost any other sort of fan community. So it's always fun to talk to you all and just get more information. And other than that, just have conversation with you. So I'm really grateful that you decided to do this for me.
Well, I know we enjoy it too. You're absolutely right about it having more of a family feel. I mean, back from the days we were doing the show, there was that connection, and that's continued and continues still.
Yeah, it's always a good thing. To get started here, the way that I usually always start the podcast, the first question I ask, and then we'll go kind of before that too later on. But the first question I usually ask everyone is, what was your introduction to Barney? What got you started to become a writer for Barney and then last for so many years?
Going way back just before Barney, I was working here in the Dallas area doing shows for the Chuck E. Cheese pizza franchise with the performing robots doing their singing, dancing, joking, basically kind of a robot vaudeville act. And one of the voice talents for that production, which I was doing for some years, was Bob West. He did the voices of Jasper T. Jowls, a country singing dog, and the Pasquale, the Italian cook. And so I had been working with Bob for years doing voice stuff. I was a producer. I don't, and anyway, always fun working with Bob. And we would do these shows every few months. And as always, when we would start something, those of us in the freelance type business would say, "So, what are you up to lately?" And one time Bob came in and he says, "Well, I just made these 3 dinosaur videos for kids for some school teacher moms. And they're going to try to distribute those." And I said, "Well, is anything going to come of that?" And he says, "No, I don't think so." So he was wrong. But those would be the original videos done with Sandy Duncan in the area here. But obviously that had some legs. And since I was already writing songs and jokes for animated rats and dogs and chickens, I thought I could add a dinosaur to the list. So I actually sent a letter to the producers, Cheryl Leach, Kathy Parker, Dennis DeShazer, to say, "Hey, I'm in town. I do silly stuff if you need a writer." And at the time, I didn't hear back from them. And then later saw an article in the newspaper that Barney was being picked up for PBS. And I thought, well, that ship has sailed without me. But no, I got a call to come in and interview with the producers, and that went very well. And following those interviews, they interviewed a bunch of people, and they ended up only selecting 2 writers, myself and Mark Bernthal, to write the entire season, which at the time we didn't know was impossible. So we said, okay. So that's how we got started on the show. And then once it started, it's like a roller coaster ride. You're on until the end of the ride. You don't get off anywhere along the way. So that's kind of where it started.
Cool. Let's talk about season 1 for a second.
Yeah.
So you came in with season 1, like you said, it was just you and Mark Bernthal. When you guys wrote those shows and when they were getting prepared to air on PBS, you just said previously that when you talked about West about Barney, when he had just did those first 3 Backyard Gang videos, no one, and I think we've heard it many times before, no one at that time thought that show would take off at all. They just thought it was kind of a moment in time kind of thing.
Yeah.
When you came into season 1 and you guys started writing and it started getting ready to be prepared to air on PBS, did you have the thought or idea that this show would boom and become what it is that we know of it today? Or did you still kind of have that sentiment of this probably won't go nowhere?
No, I didn't think it would go nowhere because look at the great writers they just hired.
Yeah.
No, mostly kidding. But I did. We obviously had no idea it was going to get big. Our goal at the time was a lot of experts in the field were saying, you can't do this in Texas. You can't do this with non-union writers. You can't do any of this in any way. And so those of us who've worked in television production in Dallas, it's a good town for media and talented people. And so all of us, I think, came to the project thinking, you know what, we've got something to prove here. We're going to show we can do this. Now, how successful it would be out of our hands, but it was something we all took very seriously, and it's not just a gig. We wanted to prove, by golly, we could actually do a national television show with limited resources in what Hollywood would consider the middle of nowhere, and so we didn't know it would get big, but once we started it, it had its own momentum for us working on the show. But we were, frankly, during the first season, we were so busy working on it, we didn't really have much time to pay attention to how it was playing to the audience or what kind of ratings it might be getting. We didn't have time to come up for air. So what it may have been doing out there in the public, we barely knew.
Gotcha. You you kind of joked where you said we had these great writers, and you said mostly kidding. But I spoke to Jess Nelson a few days ago for the podcast, and
Jess is a great guy.
He really is. Yeah, and it was a lot of fun to talk to him.
Yeah.
But I mentioned to him, I said you might have been joking there, but I told him in those very beginning years of Barney on PBS, it was almost pure magic how all the perfect people aligned together. They had you and Mark Bernthal as writers. They had Jess, Bob West, Dave Joyner.
It was amazing.
That doesn't just happen in TV. You don't just get those things to line up like that.
No. I mean, what a bunch of people to work with. And I'm thinking of all of the voice talents: Bob West, Patty Wirtz, and Julie Johnson. The body talents: David Joyner, Jeff Brooks, Jeff Ayers. All great. We had great directors. The producers were on top of their game. Bob Singleton doing music, please. He's wonderful. So it is still amazing to me that so many of just the right people managed to come together at that time.
For sure.
I know Cheryl Leach would say that was fate, and it's not always a good idea to argue against Cheryl Leach when she says something is fated to be. But it was truly an exceptional group of people to work with. And let me do one quick qualification when I joke about, they had the special writers come in. I'm in no way disrespecting the previous writers, but the thing is, the mission of the show changed. The original videos with Sandy Duncan and a few other follow-ups, it was about kids having fun with this dinosaur and let's do some songs and do things. And the format was such that was really all you needed to do. At the point the PBS show was going to start, suddenly it had to be educational. Suddenly you needed elements that were going to be replicated show after show. You had a set cast, and so we needed to write differently, and also evolve the character a bit from what had been before. So the writing was different, but I'm sure the original writers were swell.
Yes. And you know those original shows, those first six
Uh-huh.
are classics to everyone.
Oh yeah.
As much as those first, I would say those first 3 years of Barney and Friends were. I mean,
Yeah.
all of the whole '90s era is a classic, but you know a lot of
Oh
those
yeah.
fans, they look at seasons 1, 2, and then 3 as really what defined who Barney is as a character. So it
Yeah.
gives me chills sometimes talking about it because it has to be fate or whatever it is that made things align just the way they are. And I always argue that the
Uh-huh.
way you and Mark Bernthal as writers, the way Bob did the music, the way all those people, the kids, the voice
Yeah.
actors, you guys made that show what it is and why I think that's what made it last so long. I think if anybody else would have been replaced with someone else, I don't know if that magic would have happened as perfectly almost as it did.
I agree, and not in a self-serving way, but that you needed the whole package of people. It was uh,
Yes.
like a very strange Swiss watch, but all
Yeah,
of the pieces, no matter how they were shaped originally, they all belonged in that machine, and they were all necessary.
for sure.
I know one term that we would use behind the scenes sometimes was simply Barney magic. That
Yeah.
things happened because of Barney magic, and that was mostly tongue in cheek. But sometimes it seemed like yeah, there was a little additional something going on that
Yeah.
helped bring the show together. The people, the moment in time, it became a phenomenon. So it's
Yes.
hard to explain, but it was certainly interesting being there for it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, like you said, it is hard to explain, but you just
Yeah,
appreciate it for what it was and what it has done,
yeah,
and how long it's lasted. Um,
yeah,
I I don't know if you remember, but you said you were working so much on this show that you didn't really see the public response to who
yeah,
Barney was. Do you
yeah.
remember the moment you officially seen how big this thing has become, how much of a phenomenon it had become?
I think the real turning point for me personally was when we were going to do the Barney live show
Mhm.
in New York at the Radio City Music Hall, and I was up there working on it and terrified to a certain extent, but
Yeah.
but it was exciting.
Mhm.
But I stepped out of the theater for air. I think on the first day of ticket sales,
Mhm.
and I wasn't even used to being in New York, so every time I went outside, anyway, it was like.
Yeah.
But so I step out of Radio City Music Hall, and there's a line of people down the sidewalk, past the shops, the streets, as
Wow.
far as I can see, and a New York policeman on horseback riding past the people to make sure
Wow.
they're staying in line. And that was I've got goosebumps. I don't think they're showing, but that was the moment when I really really realized that the show was not just something that we were doing in a too small studio in Allen, Texas, and just doing with our friends. That people were actually seeing this, a lot of people, and that they
Yeah.
were really interested and invested in it. So I had, I was aware of some ratings and stuff before, but that
Mhm.
was the first real visceral moment that the light bulb came on for me that this is really bigger than I thought.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. And it has to be almost daunting, especially when you're the one writing this show that's coming up. You had
Yeah,
written this stuff on TV, so it had to be a little daunting, I think. At least for me, it would have been to
yeah.
see all those people, and then like, oh man, I really have to make this show something special, right?
Oh, that it's one of the great terrors and great personal triumphs of my life because
Yeah.
I had never written a stage show. I had never been to New York.
Yeah.
They I was brought in to write the show. Originally, the producers thought that they would write that show, and that it
Mhm.
would mostly just be a concert in the style of there had previously been a tape of Barney at the Majestic Theater,
Yes.
which was mostly, we'll come out with a few props, we'll sing a song, and then we'll change costumes and sing a song. And in making that video, which predates me, they had to stop production every time a song would end so that they could do the costume changes and rearrange the set or whatever. And so shooting it took hours. And by the end of it, a lot of the audience had left. Well, at Radio City, you can't really do that.
Yeah.
And so it was, the producers decided some weeks ahead of time, we'd like you to write it.
Yeah.
Okay. And not knowing much of anything about this, I was flown to New York to go to Radio City to get a feeling for the theater, what it could do, what the facilities were like. And as I say here, I was already stunned just by New York. Yeah. But then straight from the airport to Radio City Music Hall, where they were doing their annual Christmas Spectacular. And when they say Christmas Spectacular, they're not kidding. They've got elevators coming up through the stage floor with ice skaters. They have a nativity scene at the end with living elephants and camels coming across. Wow. They've got choir singers on side balconies, little stages looking over the audience. So I am looking at all of this and thinking, we can't really put 3 dinosaurs and 5 or 6 kids in the middle of this stage that you could land a plane on, right, and just have them sing at the audience. It had better be a big show. So after seeing all of that, I flew back to Texas, went straight to the library, took out every book they had on how to stage a school play.
Yeah.
So I get, okay, what's stage left? What's stage right? Proscenium, thrust. What? So I was trying to learn quickly, but it was my goal. If we're gonna do a concert at Radio City, I wanted to make it look like a Radio City sized concert.
Oh, for sure.
Man, we cut it close. we had never successfully completed a dress rehearsal on stage prior to opening night, and the first successful beginning to end performance was the one in front of an audience. And so again, I'm going to cite Barney Magic for that. It was the first time everything worked, but the show was exciting and a triumph. But until it worked, it was sheer terror.
Oh yeah. Well, I do the Mr. K's Clubhouse show before I did,
and very well too.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Before I started that, I was a local community actor, and so I had a show like that where there was over 1,000 music and lighting cues and thing, and we never got through a rehearsal until the very first opening night. So I could just imagine. And you guys are doing a show with not only these costume actors and voices, but also kids that's involved. And not getting through a rehearsal before opening night, it's terrifying for adults. So I could only imagine for all of you in that moment.
Well, and the kids were all great to work with, talented and professional, and certainly they had been able to get through. They had gotten through multiple rehearsals of the material. The problem was at the point that we're trying to do an actual stage rehearsal, and suddenly the script calls for shooting somebody out of a cannon on stage. In this case, it was supposed to be BJ, but it turned out to be the Wingster. And so at the point that a cannon blows off and a dummy of the Wingster goes halfway across the stage, and then just sways, it's like, and what do we do now? So that would slow everything down. As you know, we've got Teamsters throwing ropes and and there was so much going on in the show that it was very hard to get through everything that had to happen live until there was an audience there. To me, it felt like with all of those, the multitude of kids and parents there believing in it, I absolutely feel like their belief made it happen.
For sure.
So yeah, what a great experience.
Yeah.
Now that it's over.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much respect for you though for what you did. That video, along with Imagination Island, are the two most loved, I would say most loved videos of the Barney and Friends era. Obviously there was other ones, Night Before Christmas and those things, but those, if you ask anyone, what's your favorite Barney movie? It's always New York City or it's always Imagination Island.
That's nice. Both are near and dear to my heart. So that's very pleasing to hear.
I think it's because for one, like you did so well not ever writing a stage production, and to come up with a show like you did with Live in New York City really set Barney at, I think that also put Barney at a position that everything that followed it had to match that magnitude. And then you followed up with a show like Imagination Island, which is far bigger than we've ever seen Barney in video form, just like New York City was far bigger than we had seen Barney yet on a stage, right?
I agree with that. I think it both of those things set the bar higher in terms of audience expectations, and that was good for us because then we would shoot for those same goals. But it did make things a little more challenging, but also that much more rewarding.
For sure. Yeah, and so doing what you did, that magic that even you just pulled from the script side for a show like that, not ever have written for stage, is amazing because now, with the show that we do, we wrote our first stage production, which you gave some feedback on. And, a lot of the things that we looked at when we were trying to write that for the very first time in our lives was looking at shows that you've written for stage for Barney and then other shows as well. And so like you not having that experience and then doing so many wonderful shows for Barney, we've been able to use your expertise and your talent that you've had to put it into new generations. So it's like a cycle that just keeps giving to each other, which is awesome.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly the cycle didn't start with me. I learned from others of my generation. It's a grand tradition, and I'm glad that you're so active about keeping it going.
Yeah, we try to do our best, and without people like you all with Barney and Mr. Rogers and those guys, we wouldn't have that. Not saying someone couldn't have created it in this time, but I think the way things happened in past at the dawn of television and then the 90s, having shows like all of you to become those like front runners, I guess you could say, has really strengthened us to be able to continue carrying what was created before us. So we try to do our best there.
Yeah, that's great.
When we talk about, and I don't know if you remember this, but this is something that just came up to me because someone asked about it in History Fans a week or so ago. When it comes to Live in New York City, we had the main set of kids that we had all known from seasons 1, 2, and eventually 3. Do you remember what the purpose was to include the character Carlos at that time, and then why it seemed like a random kid. Kelly was just kind of there for a little bit, and then they disappeared, and then they came back. Do you remember what the purpose was to add those two characters along?
I think that the idea was that I forget how long the run was at Radio City, maybe 10 shows or 2 weeks or something. I don't know. It was years ago. But the thing is, part of the challenge of writing the script was not only to write a show, but also to try to make it bulletproof. So that I tried to think of everything that could go wrong and plan how to cover it just in case. Part of that was, okay, we get up there and what if one or more of the kids get sick? So we had to have understudies who could come in and fill those roles, because certain lines the kids had were critical to set up the dialogue.
Sure.
For what was going on. And so we needed a couple of spare kids just in case the cast got thinned out by illness or other circumstances. Sure. So that was the main reason we had the additional kids.
Gotcha. Makes perfect sense. From that, you had written a handful of other live show productions for Barney.
Yeah.
Did you ever get a chance to see any of those that you wrote after Live in New York City? See them in person with an audience?
I did. I think with all of them, they would do rehearsals in the Dallas area, and frequently that would be the first performance. So I would be at the theater every day as they were working it out on stage, making notes, things to change, sticking my nose where it didn't belong. No, that audio cue ought to come a little sooner. I don't think the purple gels on the lights are working with Barney. You should try it. So yeah, I felt perfectly free to opine about lots of things. But so until the show would actually open, I was pretty much hands-on, still working on it. So yeah, I got to see those other shows, and I must say it was always exciting seeing those. The live shows were some of my very favorite Barney projects to work on because of the immediate feedback. I could be very happy with the shows we were shooting in studio, but wow, there's and again, old guy goosebumps. But there's nothing like having a show start, curtain opens, Barney comes out, and there's this wave of sound.
Oh yeah,
from the audience. They're ecstatic, and you just feel that love and energy washing over you. That's what I loved about the live shows. So yeah, they were very special to me. And another thing I'll just mention from a writer standpoint, mm-hmm. I enjoyed those shows because when you're working on TV, other people are going to be making the choices of where the camera is looking, what you see at any given time. But if everything's happening on the stage, directing that attention again comes down largely to the writing. Sure. Who's speaking? What are they doing? Where are they grouped? So just from the standpoint that it gave me a little more control over what the experience was going to be like, it was personally rewarding for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel a little robbed because as a kid, I never got to see any shows of Barney live. Our family couldn't afford it. So yeah. I think big surprise, and then the last one that came close to us was the Let's Go tour. And I of course always, as much as a huge Barney fan as I am, I always wanted to see those, but I never got a chance. So it was always great when those would come on video, because you can still kind of feel the love and the magic through those videos of seeing the audience participation. In I wish I would have been able to be in the audience for some of those, but having those on video still kind of makes me. As a child, I felt like I was there, so it's always great when it happen.
We need to find a way to get those on the big screen somehow. And, give a theatrical feeling at least.
Exactly, for sure. We're talking about how great Barney did in those early years, and how big he became. To me, I feel, and I think about this often, I think when it comes to children's entertainment and a show like Barney, I think he was robbed a lot of some of the accolades that you all well deserved, Emmys and those kind of things, for the type of work you did for a show like that. Uh-huh. We had that documentary that came out and those kind of things. Yeah. Aside from that, why do you think others didn't appreciate what existed. You know, you get Sesame Street, which is great, and Mr. Rogers, who are great, and they got awards for the great work they did. But Barney also set a precedent for what children should be. Children's shows should be after he came, and he just doesn't get that respect. Why do you think? Do you have a personal thought of why you think that is?
Oh, absolutely. I think the show was greatly misunderstood by a lot of people, and part of that I will lay at the door of how the show was marketed. The thing is, we were very, very conscious of making a show for very young children.
Yeah.
It went into every decision, the music, the language, making sure we weren't using too high level language, the concepts we were presenting, and things that people probably wouldn't notice very much, such as we weren't doing a lot of quick cuts like Sesame Street or something, because that's harder for a young audience member to follow. And so if Barney said, "Hey, let's go to the clubhouse," instead of doing a quick cut and they're in the clubhouse, we would cut to a wide shot and everybody's going there, walking in a door. Then we would cut to a reverse of coming in a door. And so those kind of smooth transitions, I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah.
But every beat of the show was calculated to work well to communicate with that audience. Now, for people who weren't trained to look for that, they would think, "What are you doing? Why are you killing time walking across, a schoolyard to do this?" And the other thing, and probably a main thing, is that the content, because our audience was so young, was so very basic. And a lot of the learning elements were incorporated kind of under the surface. A lot of labeling, for instance. If we said, "And this is an apple," we would make sure that when you heard the word apple, you were seeing an apple. Well, which is why actually when the show was analyzed, they said, "Holy cow, this has so many educational beats in it." But people who aren't specifically looking for that didn't see it. And so I think we didn't get much in the way of awards because people were not aware of what was going on under the surface. And I don't think, as I say, from a marketing standpoint, I don't think it was made clear enough that this show really was for like toddlers and down. Now, it's fine. We love the fact that there was older audience members who enjoyed it, but the content was very specifically geared to those younger kids. We saw ourselves as creating a show that would eventually hand off the audience to Sesame Street. So we were before that, but it was not well understood, and so adults who were used to seeing Sesame Street and the great humor coming out of the Henson shop thought, "Well, I'm not laughing at this. This doesn't speak to me." And that was a feature, not a bug, but it wasn't generally understood, and so people just thought, "Well, that's kind of a dumb show," and no, it wasn't at all. But it wasn't for you if you were too old. Parents and teachers understood this because they were trained to how kids communicate, and so they could see it. But unless you were in that mindset, it was pretty easy to dismiss the show, and I think that happened more than I wish it would have.
Yeah, I agree. You touched on it a little bit, and I wanted to ask you about it anyway. You were talking about, like, in that answer, you were talking about how you had to choose the right language for the type of kids that you were gearing towards and things like that. One of the fans wanted me to ask, kind of, how do you it's a few different parts, so you can answer how you want to, but when you're writing a script for Barney, how do you come up with those age appropriate story ideas, but then but also how do you choose the right language that doesn't lose these very young kids that you're trying to write to?
That was always a challenge. Writing something that ends up being simple is hard.
Yeah.
You really have to distill it down to its essence, and it was a process almost word by word. If you couldn't say something about clouds and ask, well, what are clouds? Oh, those are water vapor. Now let me explain to you what vapor is. And it's like a gaseous state. So it was really easy to write ourselves into a corner. So you had to select the language very carefully. Our developmental researchers, Marianne Dudko and Margie Larson, were very good about helping us identify terms to use and keeping us aware of the language level, so we weren't getting too high level, and so that helped a lot. But it was it was an interesting challenge. Writers love using words, and writers tend to know a lot of words, and a lot of those tools just weren't available to us. We for the most part needed to avoid things like puns because they wouldn't be understood. So an awful lot of the tools in a writer's tool belt were not available to us. So keeping things really simple was a challenge.
Yeah, gotcha. Let's go back in time real quick.
Sure.
Kind of off the topic of Barney for a moment.
Yeah.
You mentioned what got you into Barney was working on Chuck E. Cheese and knowing Bob West and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, at least knowing who Barney was, that was kind of your introduction.
Yeah.
But why did you choose the path of writing? How did you get into writing? Or maybe what was your intro to getting a gig like Chuck E. Cheese and being able to write for them back in the early days?
I had always been interested in television, performance, comedy. It was both of my parents were artists. They met in art school, and so I was raised, with my brothers and sister in an artistic environment. Their friends, who were our family friends, and they had kids, they all went to art school at the same time also. So it was this kind of commune of, well, not a commune, we all had different houses, but it was a very artistic group of people, and we were all encouraged to be expressive. And my dad, bless his heart, was a hilarious guy. My mom had a great sense of humor, and so humor was encouraged at home. And so it was a natural transition then as I got older, thinking, well, I'd like to do something with comedy. I'd like to do something with television. And back then, the only way you could do anything with television was really to get a job at a TV station. There was no such thing as consumer video cameras or video recorders.
Yeah.
Certainly not magic phones from the future that would do it all. So my twin brother and I, not identical, for 70 years he's been known as the cute one. But we did a live stand-up comedy in Bloomington, Indiana, and in order to pursue our TV dreams, my brother got a job at the local TV affiliate in Bloomington, Indiana, WTTV, which means it's a small station, and so you start off by like directing the farm show at 4 a.m.
Sure.
And then here's the weather, and here's when to put your seed corn down. And then at night we would be allowed to go into the studio and shoot things for ourselves. So we had that kind of a background, and that was something I wanted to pursue. Although at the time, unless you could actually get a gig on television, there was no other market. There was no internet. There was no YouTube. There was people didn't even have video recorders to play what you did. So, so eventually, I moved from Bloomington to Dallas, Texas, with my wife Kathy, because Dallas is a good radio market, and at the time, I was doing a lot of radio, writing radio commercials, producing them, voicing them. Actually, my partner for much of that was Richard Stone, who then became the music writer for Warner Brothers, Animaniacs, the Toons series. He got, I think, seven Emmys for that. And working with him was a dream, and such fun we had. And so again, that kind of kept that wanting to do those kind of fun things alive for me. So when I moved to Dallas, I was doing radio commercials for ad agencies and working with a lot of voice talents and specializing in humorous commercials. And one of the agencies, Morock and Associates, I'm sorry, was representing Chuck E. Cheese, and they lost whoever was writing their shows at the time. And Chuck E. Cheese, like slash Showbiz Pizza, asked the agency, "Do you have any suggestions for writers?" And they knew me on a freelance basis, and hey, he's a funny guy and lapses into voices at inconvenient times. Maybe he would be good. So that's how I got the Chuck E. Cheese gig, working with a bunch of good people, and that was freelance, but it was regular. We would do about 4 shows a year, and so that was the entree to Bob West and a lot of the production community in Dallas. And so, and then you already know how that made the jump to Barney, and and here we are. That's how the magic happened.
That's awesome. That's a really great story. And I like to hear those kind of things of what was the path to get to where you were, to where these things were successfully happening for you. Because there's a lot of people that I think that exist, who they might find a commonality within their own stories, that it just shows you that it doesn't just start from the magic. There's a build up to that, and there's a path that people take to get to where they are.
Exactly. All the best stuff in my life has taken me by surprise. The trick to it is to be working toward something, whatever it is, so that you don't know when the opportunity will show up. The trick is to try to be ready for the opportunity when it's there. That's not when you start getting ready for your chance. Be working on getting ready, and then hopefully when the opportunity is there, you'll have a chance to run with it.
For sure.
In case somebody just says, "Say, for your first stage project, how would you like to fill a Radio City Music Hall?" So that's you want to practice first.
Yes, lessons learned. Still aside from Barney real fast, and then we'll get back to some Barney things before I take up the rest of your day.
You're doing great, and it's always such fun talking to you.
Thank you. Same. Are there any other shows or movies or things that you've wanted to? You mentioned when you initially reached out for Barney, you didn't hear anything back until you saw they were moving to PBS. Are there any other shows or movies or things like that maybe you have done some work for, or reached out to do some work and never heard back from, that you wish you had the chance to work on?
Not for the most part. In part because I still live in the Dallas area, and so there wasn't that much else going on around here that I could apply for, and that was a deliberate choice. When I was much younger, I went out to Los Angeles for a while, and I thought, this is not for me. It's where a lot of great opportunity is. It was great for my buddy Rich Stone, but personality-wise, it wasn't going to work for me. So I have written actually another film script that nothing came of that, and some other projects. But for the most part, I haven't applied for things that haven't happened. So no, not really a lot of that.
A fun fact, though, that some listeners might not know that I think you mentioned in History Fans a while back was that you and I think it was Bob Singleton put you almost like you guys created like a theme song for King of the Hill. Is that right?
Oh yeah, that was kind of a fun thing. Bob had an agent in Los Angeles who would be looking out for projects, and here was this animated King of the Hill show that was going to come on. We didn't know anything about it other than just a few basic facts, nothing to see. And his agent said, "Hey, I can get a song in front of these people if you can write one." So Bob and I got together and we wrote a theme song, not knowing exactly how the show was going to go, but it came out nicely. It obviously didn't become the theme song, and in fact the theme they eventually used was just a short instrumental piece.
Yes.
So a guy writing lyrics turned out not to be necessary at all. But that was a fun thing, and similarly, Bob and I had written a few songs for. I'm not sure. I don't think anyone care at this point. There was a show called Party Town Friends that was a cartoon series, and I don't think it ever made it to air. But we did a few songs for that in the early developmental stages, and those were great fun to do. And similarly, there was the Muppets in Space movie needed some songs, and we wrote songs for that, which also were a lot of fun. I say we wrote songs for that. They didn't buy them. So I can't really on my resume say Muppet songwriter.
Exactly.
But working with Bob is always a joy, and the songs were fun, and because my voice was more Linder back in the day, I got to sing a lot of parts as the different Muppets. So that just appeals to the ham in me. So much of my career has been about trying to have fun, and so that stuff has been a lot of fun to do.
That's awesome. That's amazing. That's one of those things too. Like you said, we wrote songs for them, but they didn't buy them. That happens a lot when you're creating for other people. You just
absolutely.
You really don't.
Yeah.
That kind of brings me back to Barney. That's a nice segue that I didn't expect to happen. But one of the questions that I had also is, and I know the answer to at least one of these because we've talked about it. But were there some other episodes or home videos that you submitted to Barney that you wish would have been made that they, for some reason, passed on the proposal or passed on script?
Yeah. Now one of them that actually made it into script form was a home video about Barney and the kids and little dinos. I mean, the whole usual group visiting a hospital. Because one of the kids had an accident good enough to be in the hospital, but not life-threatening. But it was a chance for us to go in, see what a hospital is about, learn about some of the things that are likely to happen, make it fun, make it inviting. I mean, it was a typical Barney adventure with lots of fun and foolishness and familiar songs. And I that one was fully scripted. But then there was a decision, I think, from the marketing people that they say, "Oh, we can't sell this. That's too depressing." Well, no, it wouldn't have been depressing at all. It was a standard Barney video, and it wasn't called Barney Goes to the Hospital. It was Barney's Get Well card. Wee. So it was a good script. It was a good show, and part of the thought behind it was every kid is either going to end up with some kind of a medical procedure in a hospital, or have a sibling or a friend in the hospital, or for that matter, an adult in their life. And the whole idea was to make a video that would help them not be scared of what the experience is about, so that they could see that the personnel at a hospital were just other people. They were caring, that big X-ray machines actually weren't scary, but they did something cool. So yeah, I really wish that one had been able to be produced and distributed, because I think it would have been a comfort to a lot of kids over the years. There was also a we were going to do one with, again, all of the dinos and kids doing classical music and orchestra, learning about the instruments and those kind of things. That would have been a lot of fun. And our executive producer at the time just said, you can't make a visit to the orchestra interesting. And she was wrong, but she still was executive producer. So so that one didn't happen either. And I think those are the main two. There was another one in which we were going to learn about trains, and that would have been fun. And for that matter, now that I think of it, another one about visiting an art museum. So I'm still available to write any of those.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Yeah, those are all really, really great ideas, and it's so strange, because Barney was this character that kind of worked almost anywhere. So Barney at the hospital, or Barney learning classical music, any of those things, if you put Barney kind of in that equation and add that magic, it would have worked. So it's strange that they would choose against that.
It's actually one of the great things about putting Barney in other locations is doing the stuff in the park or a caboose or a schoolroom. We did so much of that it was really hard not to just be duplicating ourselves. So when you have a fresh environment or a location to go to, it just opened things up for the writing, for the performance, for shooting. So yeah, I loved it when we could do that, and I think Barney would have worked in any of those scenarios.
For sure. Let's talk about this a little bit. So it's still in tune with writing for Barney, obviously. We've real fans have known during your time with Barney, there were some moments where what you wrote got changed and didn't, the great scripts turned into something else. We know that kind of a small story about that with when we were talking about live shows with Barney's Musical Castle.
Yes.
With that show, I believe you've never seen that show, right?
I have not.
Okay. So I guess I can't really ask that, because I wanted to ask how different would that show have been had they followed your formula. But if you don't know even how it turned out.
I know kind of how it turned out. It would have been significantly different. At the time, I forget what his title was, but maybe executive producer, I don't know, Tim Klott. That show was coming up, and so I was part of a brainstorming meeting since I had done previous concerts, and what can we do? What could be fun for the kids? And I suggested, well, we did the first Barney home video I worked on was Magical Musical Adventure, in which the kids go and they meet a king and there's a castle and lots of fun. And I said, that would be a fun thing to expand on and use that as a starting point. And then we already know it's good material. And apparently Tim agreed with that, because his decision then was, yeah, and we already own your script. So yeah, we'll just give that idea to somebody else because you would cost more. So suddenly I was out the door on that one.
Wow.
And they subsequently went through I think several writers trying to get it into show form. I think that parts of it then were also still being rewritten by directors. I think Marianne Dudko, our researcher, had to rewrite some of it. So it did not become a cohesive show, to my understanding. So yeah, it would have been significantly different, but I'm sure they saved a few bucks.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure they did. It's always strange to hear those kind of things. Because you would, I don't know, for me, it's like you would think with a person like yourself, who had written so many successful things up to that point. And up to, when we talk about the movie, when we talk about those later years, that they didn't, it's very strange that they still, to me, I think writing for Barney is almost, and we've said this before, but I appreciate everyone that worked on that show. But I think writing for the character is what makes the character more than, if you don't have the right words for the character to say, people like Bob West can't really give that character life. And I think that's what we saw in the later years of Barney. After you left and things, the shows weren't that great because the writing wasn't that great. So you get Barney to be, he sounds boring and adult-like and things like that. And I think it's because when you lose the magic of the writing, you lose those characters. And so it's strange that they would not
absolutely
see that. Yeah.
And again, I had mentioned earlier that a lot of people, when we were talking about awards and things, they didn't really understand what it was about the show, what it really was at its core. Oh, pardon me. I don't need that. Hollywood. No, it's not. It's the last. That's probably going to be an annoying sound for a minute. It's telling me I have a book in at the library.
Gotcha.
So remember, kids, reading is fundamental.
Yes, it is.
Okay, there, fine. That's now you get public service credit. What in the world was I even talking about, Karen?
We were talking about how people just didn't understand the writing side of things.
There you go. And the point I was going to make is unfortunately that became true within the company also, and with management. I remember a meeting again with, maybe he was CEO, but with Tim Klott, and it was a general meeting of department heads and stuff. And he's saying, now, of course, none of us knows what it is that makes Barney magic, and I'm like about ready to chew my arm off.
Yeah.
I know exactly. As a matter of fact, I wrote the handbook on it.
Exactly.
Sir. But there was a belief among a certain tier of executives at the company that the property was just magic. It would just make money on its own, and that there really wasn't a planned significant core to it about how things had to be. They thought it just happened somehow. And so, I think I think some of my contributions, and certainly the contributions of others, were undervalued for that reason.
Oh, for sure.
They didn't realize that we weren't just there on a successful show,
for sure,
but that our efforts over the years had made it a successful show.
Yes. And that's one thing, because I have to admit, even I did this when starting Clubhouse is that I think, like you said, a lot of people, they don't understand. And when you look at a show as simple as Barney looks on screen when you're watching it, they don't understand all the elements and the work that it takes to make something that simple happen, right? I did that when I started with Clubhouse. I mean, how hard could it be? And then from the writing, the scripts, the pacing of it, the characters, all of those things to just make something so simple takes a lot of work.
And that was actually one of the reasons why originally, as we were before the PBS episodes had aired, and we were just plotting, okay, how are these going to fit together? We knew in order to, there would be some flexibility in the timing of the shows after we cut all the scenes together, but we needed right down to the second to have an exact time that it would be every time. So that was one of the reasons why we created the Barney Says segment at the end, because if we had to fill 17 seconds or 53 seconds, that's how long that segment would be. That was our buffer. But I suggested at the time that this would be where we could recount the educational points we had made, just to make them explicit to mom and dad or other adults who were watching, because they could watch the whole show and they thought, well, there's nothing educational that happened in there. And so during Barney Says, we'd say, well, we learned that the apples grow on trees, and the trees benefit from the rain, and the seasons do this. And they'd go, oh, yeah, okay, well, I guess there were a dozen things in there that were educational. But that was a big part of Barney Says, was just to make it evident to people that the stuff was really there if you knew to look for it.
Yeah, exactly. You were a very busy guy during the Barney years.
Yes,
like
I
said it before, one of the main reasons I think why Barney was so successful was because of your writing and your
thank you.
The talent that you have for that. Do you remember? You said that you were so busy writing, so you didn't really get to see things in public and that kind of thing when it started out.
Yeah.
How long before, say, you finished writing for, say, season 1, or let's say when it was kind of on a roll at that point, let's say maybe season 4, do you remember when you start working on the next season or the next home video? Was it almost back to back, or was there any space in between?
Oh, there was space in between, usually because we never knew if there was going to be another season.
Oh, sure.
I mean, after maybe season 4 or something, we had a pretty good idea. Well, they're not going to dump us yet, but at the end of season 1, for instance, we were canceled.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, okay, all of we freelance production nomads had better be looking for our next gig, because the folks at the execs at PBS just didn't like the look of Barney and the simplicity of it. Turns out the audience loved it, and made their voices heard during the fundraising drives, and so suddenly we were hired again. But it seemed like we were always running behind the gun, so that rather than getting ready for the next season and getting some scripts in the hopper, we would wait until the deals were signed and it's going to happen. It's like, okay, well, we've got another new season coming up. This is great, and we start shooting in 4 weeks. Go.
Wow.
So there were times in between where there was really not much happening.
Yeah.
Although usually between seasons is when I would be writing home videos.
Sure.
But then once we got the go ahead for a new season, we were always running behind, and it was very tight. Hark! I hear the dog. The first season, I think Mark and I only had about 1 week to write each script, with all of the revisions. So that was an exciting time.
Yeah. Wow, that's insane to because you really have to, and I think that just speaks to the talent again. Like, being under that scope of time, with almost little to no time to do anything,
Yeah.
and still turn out scripts that have stood the test of time for however many years it's been, is really an amazing thing. We just have a few more questions for you before we end this here.
Okay.
Let's talk about your favorite character, Riff, for a while. Yeah.
No.
You mentioned that during that Riff era, the introduction of Riff, you offered a different character that could have been added to the show. What would that character have been like? What was kind of your idea for that?
Well, I would have liked lots of different kinds of characters. For a while, I know there was discussion of maybe bringing Barney's grandmother on the show, just to give a different perspective from time. I very much liked having Scooter and Etta, the puppets, on the show for a while. My problem with Riff is that I just I'm not coming down at all on the body performer, the voice performer, or anything like that. It's simply that as a writer, we had Barney, Bop, and BJ and the kids forever, and it's like something genuinely new would give us the ability not just to write about that other character, but how our regular characters relate to that character. A whole new dynamic that would open things up a lot. And so I was so disappointed at the point Riff came on, and he didn't bring anything new to the party. He was just a third dinosaur whose main difference was that he was orange. And it's so like, please give me something else to write about, please. And at the time, one of his big distinguishing points was that he loves music. And I thought, are you kidding me? We were already legitimately the most musical show on television.
Right.
I mean, you couldn't go more than about a minute 40 seconds without us breaking into song. And so the idea, well, this character is great because he'll introduce music. And the executive producer at the time was saying, well, by introducing this character, I introduced a music curriculum to Barney. And I sometimes ask, how is the music curriculum any different than the music we've always done?
Exactly.
And these were the kind of questions that sometimes chill the conversation.
I agree with you though, because to be completely transparent, I'm one of the fans that exist who I actually don't hate Riff. There's a lot of fans who don't,
and I don't hate him. I just was. He was just. To me, he was an inconvenience. He was. It's not easy from a writing standpoint to make a character interesting who doesn't have a difference from other characters. So if he had some personality quality that was different or some ability, so we got to introduce characters so rarely that I felt this character was an impediment rather than an enhancement.
And that's what that's what I've always said. I like the character, like you said. It's nothing to the body actors and the people who build the costumes and all that.
They're fine.
They did great. I think he would be a more respected character in the world of Barney if he, like you said, if he had been used differently. Because not to sound rude, but he was almost pointless to have because he didn't add anything, right? And I wish, like, if we were going to keep it as simple as the character that he is, I think there could have been room for them to lean more into his inventing side of things than the music side. Because BJ was already musical for the rock star kind of thing, but then the show was music, like you said. So Yeah, that's my gripe with him too, is that like he really didn't add anything except for just someone else to another thing to be on screen, and that was it.
Yeah, and I know when we first talked about him on the show,
Mm-hmm.
they said that he would be really fascinated by sound, which to me had more possibilities. Not we had music, goodness, we had music, but I'm an old radio guy, as I say. I had worked in radio for years. I worked with Rich Stone doing audio stuff. I love sound effects. I love old time radio, and the notion that Riff might have both an appreciation for interesting sounds, or maybe an ability, I don't know, like a minor bird to reproduce sounds. Those could all be fun things, and we didn't do much with that. I would have liked to these kind of sounds are referred to as Foley in movie and TV and stuff. I would have liked to have done more with that. Explore the world of sound with Riff, not so much music.
Sure.
We've got music, but so yeah, I wish that we could have done some different things with the character.
Yeah, that's all I have for Riff. But moving on, really quick here. I understand that there was a moment between the lyric changing into hit and seasons 6 and 7, that kind of thing. There was those Barney home, like Barney's house videos and things like that.
Yeah.
How do you feel about Barney going into basically essentially what was Barney's world at that time? Not the reboot, like his actual world and his house. Yeah. How do you feel about that premise of that potentially being the next location before they did the park idea?
Right. And Barney's house was pretty much my idea at the time. Oh, cool. At the time, there was new management, and what new management likes to do is make change to show that they're being effective and necessary. And so we, in sitting down to think about how the show could change, the edict was simply, we're not going to do what's been done before.
Sure.
And a lot of the ideas that I was hearing at the table were things that were very not right for Barney. So in some ways it was a change to say, okay, let's go to Barney's world, Barney's house. But that was the most conservative idea I could come up with, rather than some of the weirder stuff that was being presented. And and although some people have made a criticism, which, people are free to make a criticism, saying, well, wait, no, you're losing the whole thing about, Barney and imagination if your kids are showing up at Barney's house. And at the very beginning of the Barney's house video, we see kids building Barney's house out of cardboard boxes and things, and Barney dolls. So theoretically, the setup was, this whole show is still kids' imagination. This is what they imagine Barney's house to be like. And we can argue whatever layers of reality there are, but I would have been perfectly comfortable continuing the series in Barney's house, because I thought there was a lot of fun stuff we could do with it. I liked some of the elements that we could have any number of rooms, for instance, that just as a surprise, hey, let's go into this room that's the bubble room, where there's always bubbles going on, and have fun. Or there was a bookcase that could lead us into different story adventures, and a lot of things like that. So to me, it was fun. I liked that show, and I was perfectly happy, certainly, when we went back to a more traditional format with the park and the caboose and everything. But I wouldn't have minded exploring the Barney's house concept more.
Yeah, that one was a lot of fun to see. And it was, I remember as a kid, I stayed with Barney. I never grew out of Barney. So I'm one of those awesome weird kids. I watched it all the way until it ended. Even So I remember when Barney's House came out, how exciting it was to
Yeah.
be kind of like this, like it was like a refresher of being somewhere different,
Yeah.
while still keeping the elements of what Barney is.
Uh-huh.
And you're right. It's one of those things that I don't understand the argument with the house thing, because, like you said, we literally see them build
Yeah.
the house with the Barney doll, and the song that even accompanies it is "Imagining a Place," and you can be there. It's the whole.
You get it.
Yeah. It's so strange that you would think things that simple people would understand, but
Oh yeah.
um have you, this is just a one-off question I had randomly.
Sure.
You did Rainbowbeard in season 1.
Yes.
Did you ever watch yourself? Are you one of those people that watched yourself back when, after that like episode was done? Did you ever see your
Heavens, yes. Why
Yeah.
my time on the small screen? I have got a streak of ham in me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I absolutely wanted to see that. It was great fun to do, although I was terrified.
Yeah.
Simply because it's one thing to goof around in front of people, which I do all the time. Another thing, if a bunch of people you work with professionally are pointing cameras at you, and it's like, oh, I see. If I screw up now, everyone will know whose fault it is, and they'll be looking at their watches, and it's scary.
Right.
And it was fine. Fortunately for me, my time as Rainbowbeard, or my little scene, was shot independently, so it was dropped in his video during the live production. So I didn't have to worry about hitting my cues or anything. So that was great fun for me to do, and originally. My laugh as Rainbowbeard the pirate was a lot gentler, and director Jim Rowley kept saying, "No, make it bigger, make it scarier." So I think I ended up being certainly the scariest character on Barney during the first season, and maybe for a few seasons after that. But oh, such fun to do. In point of fact, here's Rainbowbeard's bottle.
Oh, nice.
There's Rainbowbeard's bottle right there.
That's awesome.
But Rainbowbeard's hat and his bottle. They got the so yeah. I absolutely, and
that's amazing.
I needed a fake beard back then, but so that was such fun for me to do, and then similarly. Writing in a part for my buddy Mark Bernthal to be Mr. Delivery Man in an episode, which took a lot more courage. He was actually there with the characters, having to hit marks and cues and everything like that. But it was
amazing.
Oh, wasn't it? Oh, what a guy! And I've got some behind the scenes stuff of the day that we shot that, and I keep meaning to put it on YouTube, and so I'll try to do that one of these days, because it was
amazing.
It was hilarious, but great fun for Mark and I to be able to actually sneak on screen a little bit.
For sure. It's a shame we couldn't see Rainbowbeard show up in Imagination Island or something.
I actually pitched after we did Imagination Island, the sets and everything were so beautiful. I was saying, quick, before we tear this down, give me a few days. I can write a follow-up with Rainbowbeard the pirate. I was going to suggest that he was stealing colors, using the pirate ship and everything else, and we'll reuse this stuff because it's so great. But that didn't really happen.
That would be cool.
but yeah, that would have been fun, and I certainly have enough ham in me that I would have gone for it.
For sure. Yeah. That would have been cool to see. Let's talk just briefly about it. I don't talk about it much. But when we talk about this new we talk about how people come in and they're new people to a brand and they want to change things. We have this new reboot, a new version of Barney that's coming out, Barney's World, and we also have this movie that they've been talking about. What we kind of already understand the opinions about the way the cartoon looks and those kind of things.
Yeah.
What would you hope to see in the reboot and also in the movie that could make Barney still resonate with people like he has for so many years?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question, and here with the certainly the short answer is keeping Barney's heart intact, which is the way he cares about people, the way he relates to people, including with humor and all of the rest of it. Barney as a character, to me, needs to stay the same to have the appeal. He needs to be able to give that comfort, that warmth, that joy, that enthusiasm. These are qualities that, if they aren't there, a purple dinosaur is not going to be Barney.
Sure.
That being said, I also don't feel like the character is as limited as a lot of people might think. I'm not sure what will be done with the cartoon, because animation is a different medium. And if you're doing animation, do what can't be done with live action. So that's a different task, and I wish them all the luck in the world with that. With the Barney movie, I'm assuming that, that would be, I don't know if he would be CGI or in a costume, but I'm sure, but I imagine that the character would look more like classic Barney and not as much like this new animated iteration. And I've got my fingers crossed on the film, because I really think Barney can be moved into a new era, a new time of the internet and people living on phones, and a lot of divisiveness and discord in the world. Barney can cope with those things and would have something to say about those things, and would still be relevant. But it's a tightrope. He needs to keep his essential goodness and his essential positivity, while at the same time being able to acknowledge very real concerns. That's something that I've always felt he could do more of, in much the same way that you wouldn't expect Mr. Rogers, when speaking to an adult, to come off exactly the same way that he did with kids. To me, Barney has always been the same, in that if Barney was having a one-on-one conversation with an adult, he would react to an adult differently than he would a child. It's a choice. And so I would love to see Barney in some really interesting, more grown-up type scenarios that he's coping with, but still in his Barney way. And that the message being that there is a validity to that positivity, that desire to do good, to accept that the world is not always a good place, but the world is always a better place when somebody is actively trying to make it that. So I think the potential is there. Fingers crossed that they can actually make it happen. I'm holding my breath, but I'm hopeful.
Same here. When I first heard the premise a couple years ago, I was like, this won't work. But then I started looking at it at the scope of how they did with Christopher Robin in that video. But even just this new Barbie video, I honestly think, did you see the Barbie movie?
The Barney movie?
The Barbie one,
Barbie movie.
I
saw the Barney movie. I still see it in my nightmares. But no, I have not yet seen the Barbie movie. I will at some point, I'm sure, but no.
Just and it's not giving anything away, but just kind of the premise of it was, the idea was that Barbie was created, for women, girls and women, to kind of be this figure of you can be all these things. And so in Barbie's world, they believe, all the Barbies and all the Kens believe that that's what the outside world is like. Well, we were created for this, so that's how it is. And then they get put into that real world scenario where they realize just because you have this thing, it doesn't mean that everyone's lives are perfect.
Yes.
I think that kind of message would work perfectly for an adult Barney movie, where in Barney's world,
Absolutely.
it might be all sunshine and rainbows, but then in the real world, you see there are people that aren't as kind as you would hope they would be. And you can always end it on that same positive message that you could choose. You can still make the choice to be kind and to love others and to accept people. So I think after saying that, I'm kind of hopeful that they at least follow in somewhat of those kind of footsteps.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that's a very valuable and necessary lesson right now.
Yes.
This is not a good time for people to descend into cynicism and depression even about the world. There are good reasons for optimism, and especially if people are really making an effort to make things better for other people. Yes. And that's, Barney, I love you, you love me, caring is sharing, show respect to others. All of those messages to me are more relevant than ever. And the fact that the kids when Barney was dealing with kids back on the show, those kids are older now. They're adults now. I don't think there needs to be any cutoff that it's like, kids would naturally move away from Barney when they thought, oh, he's babyish. But Barney himself would not have a cutoff for those kids. Yeah. They could be adults now, and they would still be just as special to him, and he would relate to them differently.
For sure,
because his whole mission is helping us cope with the world. And adults have a different world than kids, but Barney would still want to be a part of making it better. So 100%. I so hope that this movie can do that.
Yes, I agree. Before we wrap it up here today, on this podcast, what we always like to do is we like to have each of our guests bring on, sometimes it's more than one, sometimes it's a couple things, but just a Barney item or something that they own that they hold near and dear to them. Maybe more than some of the other things that you might own.
Yes.
Can you take some time to show what it is that you have, and then just explain why you've chosen that specific item?
I can, although in some ways I've already tipped my hand. Rainbowbeard's bottle. I keep this in my office all the time. Which is getting to be quite a few years now. And this is special to me. We're just starting on the show, and I went to a neighborhood garage sale because I always like doing that. And I saw, this bottle for $3. I don't know what I could do with a bottle like that, but I like it. So I bought it. And it was after that we had the meeting about doing a show on colors and shapes, and let's do a treasure hunt. I'm thinking, treasure hunt, you need a treasure map, you need a pirate. Where do we get a pirate out of? And then I remembered this thing sitting in my office with a map on it. And I thought, let's do an Aladdin thing, a genie coming out of a bottle. So it was just pure circumstance that I had bought this on a whim, and then it turned into a prop on the show, which allowed me to be on the show. And so this is still quite special to me. It represents both the good experience of being on the show and the serendipity of finding unusual objects and then them having the ability to become part of something bigger that I wasn't expecting. So that's special to me. Another thing that I quite like, I don't know if things come up forward or backwards on the big TV here, but
forward, yeah.
Okay, so if that looks okay, this is an award for the Barney's Big Surprise tour, which
Wow.
was judged the family show of the year,
Nice.
which was awfully nice because I'm thinking, take that, Mickey Mouse on Ice. Take that, you guys. And no, I mean I'm all for all of the family shows, but
Mhm.
again, quite an honor of all of the touring family shows out there. And I think this was Performance Magazine, yes, that they judged it the best show for kids and families touring that year. And so, yeah, who doesn't like a nice award for
Yeah,
their office? So
exactly.
so that's pretty special to me. Uh, and gosh, I've got various other tchotchkes around. I can't say this guy is especially special to me outside of the fact that I've been living with him now for probably 30 years.
Yeah,
So he's become part of my life, even as the big guy has become part of my life.
yeah,
Uh, so and I could go traipsing around my office and find other small items, but
for sure.
those are some of the more special things to me.
Those are awesome. Thank you for sharing that. It's always fun
Oh
to
yeah,
see what other people have. We've seen pictures so far. We've seen plush dolls and things like that.
yeah,
So it's always a lot of fun to see. And even if we saw the same thing by someone, which we've seen that with the
uh-huh,
Dakin Barney dolls,
yes,
but everyone's story is different. So it's always fun to just kind of hear why it touches
yeah.
that
Get
person differently than someone else.
get a little history. Yes,
Yeah. Um, I have two more questions before we end this.
sure.
One, kind of selfishly for myself, and then anyone else out there.
Uh-huh.
Is there any advice that you could give for me or others who are writing or trying to create long-lasting content to the magnitude of kind of what you and others did with Barney for us, that could be beneficial for us?
Boy, that's a great question. Uh, so many things beyond just the writing had to work for me to have this opportunity to get
Mhm.
things out and the good fortune to have it last. Uh, I would say it's as I referred to earlier. You don't know when your opportunities are going to come. So
Yeah,
just try to be ready for those. But as you're working on something, uh, this is going to sound highfalutin, but to bring a certain integrity to it. If you're, I don't care if you're writing a horror movie, I don't care if you're writing a show for kids. Try to make it really good
yeah,
and be sincere about it. Something that I always wanted to avoid with Barney. We did I don't know how many episodes, videos, books, things. I never wanted anything that I worked on to be product.
sure.
I wanted a book to be worth sharing with kids reading in your lap. I wanted a video to be worth watching. I didn't want it just to be a product.
Yeah,
And these days, uh, with internet and streaming accessibility, I'm personally bugged by the word content. Uh,
sure.
because it just sounds like something coming off an assembly line. Get a fresh slice of content.
Yeah,
Uh, so to me, if you're going to do something that's likely to get noticed, likely to have some staying power,
mhm,
is to really invest yourself in going the extra distance to make it good, to make it heartfelt, to make it something that you can believe in,
for
because
sure.
I think that's what people recognize and will return to. It's great to be a viral sensation, but it's even greater to establish something that has a lasting effect on people, or creates a lasting desire for them to incorporate that in their lives.
Sure.
So just the sincerity and doing the best you can with what you've got,
Yeah.
and everybody has budget limitations. Everybody has time limitations, energy limitations. You do the best with what you've got, and so that you can be proud of it no matter what. And that's probably the best advice I can give, other than also finding a bunch of wealthy people and sending them fruit baskets and boxes of chocolate, and trying to get on their radar. It can't hurt.
Yeah, exactly. Great advice.
It's practical advice. Yeah.
Yeah. The last question I'll ask to end this here, and I always ask this for everyone, maybe worded a little differently sometimes, but I typically ask this question. But why Barney? Why did you stick on a show like that for so long? Or what is it, do you think, that makes Barney special, the kind of character that people need to have?
Yeah, for me personally, something that was absolutely huge, and was I have a daughter, Sarah, who is 36 now, but back in the day she was the right age for Barney, and it was a blessing to me that because I had this very young daughter, I had learned to speak the language of children.
Sure.
And the language you use to communicate with children is not always going to be complicated words. It's going to be simple. A lot of times it may be a vocal sound or body language. There's such a rich means of communication with kids, even when they're pre-verbal. And so it was a great help to me that's where she was and I was developmentally when I started working on Barney. And so I could write in a bunch of physical business that David Joyner could do, or just silly sounds, silly sounding words that Bob West could do so perfectly. So a lot of my early Barney experience was very directly I identified as Barney. Barney to me was a perfect parent who was always there, always understanding, always comforting, always encouraging, always inspiring. He's what every parent would want to be if we had the time and energy and enough sleep. But so in writing Barney, very frequently I was writing who I would like to be as a father, as a person. And by that same token, I saw the audience members as I saw my own daughter, and the importance of connecting with them, giving them positive information. So for me, the whole Barney experience was extremely personal. It was the bond between myself and my daughter was the bond I wanted Barney to have with his audience. And so that there are ups and downs in anything you do professionally. There are challenges and frustrations, but the main thrust of it, the message, the meaning of Barney was so personally important to me that I wanted to stay with it as long as I could. And that wasn't just me. That was very much the attitude of this cast and crew that really became a Barney family. We all intuitively understood that mission and that sincere desire to be connecting with kids in a positive way. And so I think that really that's why even now, years later, we stay in touch with each other. There were bonds that formed that will always be with us, and so that's a personal blessing that a lot of us got out of working on the show.
For sure, that's a wonderful, a great answer and a great way to end this. Steve, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and have a conversation with me.
Complete pleasure.
You really inspire myself and other fans in this community. So being able to just have this moment is a great honor for me. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. This is such fun, and I love being able to communicate with with people. I'm honored by the fact that people are still interested. So thanks all of you. Thank you. It means a lot to me.
Yes, sir. And I'll just end it with this. History fans, I hope you guys appreciated this episode. We're now on other streaming apps for the podcast. So if you're just listening to the audio, check out our video on YouTube or in the Barney History Fans Facebook page to be able to see the things that Steve was showing us here. And then also throw your name in the hat using that Google form if you'd like to be on the podcast. And hopefully one day here soon, we'll see you in your spot of love. Take care.